All right, welcome back. Hononegah, Algebra 1, 7.8, factoring polynomials completely. And so that is going to be the key phrase. When you see that in your directions, it means look out for things, meaning steps you should do when you're trying to look to factors. One, look for a greatest common factor. So look for something that's divisible or something you can take out of everything. Then you really should look at the number of terms you're talking about. If there's 4 terms, you really should think grouping. 3 terms, trinomial, and that's really the hard one. And then 2 terms, you should look for difference of squares, okay? Again, always look for GCF first. So here we go. Is there something I can take out of all of the terms? The answer to that question is no. I see 4 terms, 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. So I can take a grouping, I can take a y out of the first 2, I can take a 2 out of the second 2, and then this is where grouping comes into play. What grouping means is you're going to take the 2 GCFs and put them in one parenthesis or group them, and then keep what's the same as the other. So the second one's the same thing. I can take an x squared out of the first 2. If you can't take anything out, you can just take out a 1. Again, because the parentheses are the same. So there's a key. You have to have an x, you have to have the exact same parentheses in both of these. I can group the GCF and keep what's the same. So continuing with grouping, and we've done grouping already, so this should actually be a review here. I could take a 2x squared out of the first 2, a negative 3 out of the second 2. Again, because the parentheses are the same, I can group the GCF and keep what's the same. Next one, I can take out an x squared out of the first 2, a negative 5 out of the next 2. Because the parentheses are the same, I group the GCF and keep what's the same. So hit pause and try to see if you can work on the next one by yourself. So the first one, I can take out an x squared. And the second one, I can take out a 5. So again, GCF of the first 2, GCF of the next 2. Then group the GCF and keep what's the same. Next, all right, so notice the direction says factor the polynomial completely. And I'm going to tell you right now that is code for never stop until you feel like you cannot factor any further. So the first one here, I'm going to look for a GCF. That is the first thing I look for. They're both divisible by 3, and I can take out a x out of each one. So I divided by 3 and took out an x. Now, what's in the parentheses? This can be factored again. That is difference of squares. The first one is x and x, minus sign, 2 and 2. Do not forget the GCF needs to be part of your answer when finishing this. So again, not only did I take the GCF out in the beginning, I still need it when doing your answer. This is factoring completely. This means I did a GCF and I ended up having to factor again. So next one, there's 3 terms, but there is a GCF, so I can take a y and a 2, and a y out of each term. Now, forget about the 2y. The 2y is there. The 2y is the GCF. That's great. I'm looking at what's in the parentheses and trying to see, you know what? I wonder if I can factor this again. If there's 2 things that'll multiply to be 9, but add up to be 6. And so I can factor this again. And don't forget the GCF. So taking the GCF out is one form of factoring, but it's not the end. So just because you take the GCF, or each one is divisible by m, I still want to factor what's left in the parentheses. So in this case, factors of negative 8 that add up to negative 2. And again, don't forget the GCF when writing your answer. So the next one, there's only 2 terms. So a GCF. Now this does look a little bit different, but it is perfect squares. 5x and 5x, positive 1 and negative 1. And then don't forget the GCF when writing your answer. Now we're going to do the same thing but solve. So it needs to equal 0. That's not new. I'm going to take out the GCF and I'm going to factor completely. So two things that will multiply to be 16, but add up to be -8. Here's the key, and here's what I would say all the way along here. When solving, make sure it equals 0. Set all the factors equal to 0, including the GCF. And the only reason I didn't do this one again is because it's the exact same equation twice. So I didn't have to necessarily do this one twice. Okay, so you have 0 as one answer and 4 is your other. So the next one, I can take out an x. That's my GCF. Inside the parenthesis is the difference of squares. So x and x, 5 and 5, one's plus and one's minus. And when I go to solve, I set all the factors equal to 0. So anywhere where there is a variable, I need to set equal to 0. And again, this is only allowed when it's in factored form. So it's not like it's allowed in the very beginning. It's not like you can take like x cubed equals 0 and -25x equals 0. That's not true. When it's in factored form, so you have factored completely, then you can set the factors equal to 0. Next one, grouping. I can take x squared out of the first two, -4 out of the second two. Group the GCF and keep what's the same. Now, many of you will not look at this. You won't see that x squared minus 4 does factor again. So I actually have 3 parentheses for this one. X minus 2 equals 0, x plus 2 equals 0, and x plus 6 equals 0. And I solve each of those. So again, make sure to factor completely, and once it's in factored form, then you're going to solve. So the next one, it needs to equal 0 first. So I'm going to add 36x to both sides. All right, there's a GCF of 2x. So I took a 2x out of each one. And then inside the parenthesis, I'm looking for two things that'll multiply to be 18, but add up to -9. So there is the factored completely part. Now for the solve part. Set each of the factors equal to 0 and solve. So I set 2x equal to 0 and solve it, x minus 6 equals 0 and solve that, and x minus 3 equaling 0 and solve that one. You are building a birdhouse. You have a volume of 128 cubic inches. The birdhouse will have the dimensions as shown. It's very hard to see, but there's a 4, a W, and a W plus 4. So again, very hard to see. Volume is length times width times height. So there's the polynomial that represents the volume. Now, they are telling you that the volume of this is 128. So if I distributed this and set this equal to 0, now I can solve. So is there a GCF? Is there something I can take out of all of them? Yes, they're all divisible by 4. Then I can factor, so I need two things that'll multiply to be -32. So +8 and a -4. Now, when setting your factors equal to 0, you don't have to set something like a number equal to 0 because ultimately there's no variable there. So just the parentheses equal to 0. So W can be 4 and W can be -8. Well, you can't have a -8 side length. And so the dimensions of this, plugging W back in, is 8 inches by 4 inches by 4 inches. Last one, make sure you hit pause and try it on your own. All right, so there's a GCF of 3x. Factors of 8, that would get you 6. Once I have it in factored form, once I have completely factored it, Set the factors equal to 0 and solve. That concludes today. This is actually the very end of the chapter here. So your homework assignment is on page 407. Please make sure that you're getting help on this. This is one of the more challenging chapters of the school year. And so factoring is going to be a little bit rough. And obviously the test is going to be challenging as well. So if you have any questions, please make sure you talk to your teacher, and good luck.